The room on the third floor of the Adventurers Association building had been rented for privacy. It was not large, but it was quiet, and that was what Darren had wanted. Even so, the atmosphere inside was anything but quiet. All 11 members of the Silver Sky Party were present. Some leaned against the walls. Others sat around the long table in the middle of the room. No one looked particularly pleased to be there. Darren stood at the end of the table, hands resting lightly on the back of a chair. He had asked for this meeting. 1 month ago, he had arrived in the capital city of Gustav, a foreigner with a problem shared by many traveling adventurers. The guild of this kingdom had a peculiar regulation. Adventurers registered in other nations could not freely take work here until their credentials were verified. Verification required a simple solution: join a locally registered party. Complete 3 quests. After that, the guild would recognize their status. Simple on paper, less simple in practice. Most established parties had little interest in taking responsibility for a stranger, even temporarily. Darren had spent 2 days asking before an elderly guild receptionist had spoken to a party on his behalf. Silver Sky, a respected party with a good reputation. Their leader, a calm swordsman named Ronan, had agreed after some hesitation, and so Darren had joined them as a temporary member. From the beginning, the reception had been mixed. Some treated him politely, some ignored him. One made sure Darren knew exactly what he thought of him. "That's what I'm saying." The young man scoffed from his chair now, arms folded. "I knew this would happen." His name was Kyle, the youngest permanent member of Silver Sky and the newest before Darren arrived. He had disliked Darren from the moment they met. Silver Sky gives you a chance, and this is how you repay it. Walking out after 1 quest. The words were sharp, but they were nothing Darren hadn't heard before. During the past month, Kyle had rarely missed an opportunity to complain loudly when Darren was nearby. Some foreign solo who couldn't cut it in his own country. Probably bribed someone to get into the party. Silver Sky doesn't do babysitting. Darren had ignored it then. He ignored it now. "Kyle," a deep voice rumbled. The reprimand came from a broad-shouldered man seated beside the table. His hair had gone gray at the temples, and his arms were thick with the muscle of long years of fighting monsters. Marcus, the party's vice leader and oldest member. Kyle clicked his tongue but fell silent. Marcus then turned toward the man sitting at the head of the table. Ronan, the leader of Silver Sky, rested his elbows on the wood, fingers interlaced beneath his chin. His expression remained calm, but his eyes were studying Darren carefully. "Is this about what happened 2 days ago?" Ronan asked. The room shifted slightly. Several members exchanged glances. Before Darren could answer, someone else slammed a hand on the table. "Oh, for the God's sake, are we still talking about that?" The speaker was a tall man with a spear resting against the wall behind him. His name was Terk, the party's second attacker. "I helped a little girl," Terk said irritably. "That's it. Some thugs were roughing her up in an alley, and I stepped in. Any decent person would have done the same." A few people nodded. Darren looked at him quietly. "That isn't what happened," Darren said. Terk snorted. "Right, because you were too busy trying to drag us away." His voice rose slightly. "You remember that part? While the rest of us were stopping those bastards, you were telling Ronan we should leave it alone." "That's because we should have," Darren replied. The temperature in the room seemed to drop a few degrees. Terk stared at him as if he'd misheard. Across the table, a woman with chestnut hair tied in a loose braid frowned. She wore a healer's robe and sat close to Marcus. Her name was Elena. "Darren, I don't understand," she said carefully. "Those men were beating a child." Terk intervened. "We supported him. That girl could have been seriously hurt." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You didn't just refuse to help. You tried to pull us away." "Why?" Kyle scoffed loudly. "Because he was scared," he said. "Pretty obvious." Elena shot him an annoyed look, but she didn't disagree. "If you're afraid of a few street thugs," she continued, "how do you expect to work as an adventurer?" Kyle leaned back in his chair, grinning. "Exactly." Darren remained silent for a moment. Then he sighed. "If that's what you believe," he said evenly, "then there's no point continuing this discussion." He straightened. "I'm grateful that Silver Sky agreed to take me in. Truly, but it's clear this arrangement isn't working. I'd like to withdraw from the party." Kyle slapped the table. "I knew it. Ungrateful, Kyle." Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The younger man fell silent again. Marcus rubbed his jaw thoughtfully, his eyes moving between Darren and the rest of the group. 2 days ago, he had thought the alley incident was trivial. Now he was beginning to suspect it wasn't. He glanced at Ronan. The leader of Silver Sky was still studying Darren. "You're certain?" Ronan asked after a moment. "Yes, you won't explain your reasoning." Darren met his gaze. "I don't think it would help. Ronan considered that for several seconds. Then he nodded once. Very well. The words were calm, official. Silver Sky releases you from the party, Darren. Your participation in the completed quest will still be recorded with the guild. Darren bowed his head slightly. Thank you. He turned and walked toward the door. No one tried to stop him. The door closed softly behind him. Silence lingered in the room for a moment before Kyle snorted. Good riddance. Agreed, Terk muttered. Guy acts like we committed some terrible crime. Foreign adventurers are strange, someone near the wall added. Elena sighed but said nothing. Marcus leaned back in his chair, staring at the door Darren had just exited. Then he muttered under his breath. Damn it, Ronan looked at him. You think we made a mistake? Marcus scratched his beard. I think, he said slowly, we were naive. Ronan frowned. Before he could ask what Marcus meant, a chair quietly scraped against the floor. Someone else had stood up, a woman who had not spoken once during the entire meeting. She wore light armor, and twin daggers rested at her hips. Lydia, Silver Sky's first attacker. She walked toward the door without a word. Ronan raised an eyebrow. Where are you going? Out, Lydia replied. The door closed behind her. Ronan watched it for a moment, then looked back at Marcus. You're going after him too, aren't you? Marcus sighed heavily as he pushed himself to his feet. Yeah, he grabbed his coat. Because if I'm right, he muttered, that alley fight might be about to cause us a lot more trouble than anyone here realizes. The evening crowd in the Copper Lantern Tavern was thin. Most travelers had already finished dinner and returned to their rooms upstairs. Only a few tables remained occupied. Darren sat alone near the window. A bowl of stew and a loaf of bread rested untouched in front of him. He had ordered it out of habit, but his appetite had never arrived. Instead, he watched the street outside through the glass, people passing under the dim glow of lanterns. He heard the door open behind him. Heavy footsteps crossed the wooden floor. Then a chair scraped lightly. Darren sighed without turning. I was wondering which one of you it would be. He finally looked up. Ronan sat across from him, composed as always. Lydia took the seat beside Ronan, leaning back with her arms folded. Neither looked particularly pleased. We're not here to drag you back, Ronan said calmly. I assumed as much. Lydia studied Darren's face. You left something unsaid in that room. Darren looked between them. You two always this persistent? When something doesn't add up, Lydia replied. Ronan rested his hands on the table. Marcus believes we missed something important. Darren gave a small, humorless smile. Marcus is a smart man. Then explain it to us, Ronan said. Darren looked down at the bowl of stew for a moment. For several seconds, he said nothing. The tavern's background noise filled the silence. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. All right, he said quietly. Let me ask you a question first. Ronan gestured for him to continue. You saved the girl 2 days ago, Darren said. What do you think she's doing right now? Ronan frowned slightly. That's an odd question. Answer it, Ronan considered. If she lives in this district, probably back with her family, he said. Recovering from what happened, Lydia shrugged. Or hiding somewhere until those men calmed down. Darren shook his head. She's dead. The words landed like a stone dropped into water. Neither Ronan nor Lydia spoke for a moment. Then Lydia leaned forward slightly. That's a hell of an assumption. It isn't an assumption. Darren's voice remained calm. You beat those men in public, in their own territory, humiliated them in front of witnesses. His gaze moved from Ronan to Lydia. And then you left. Ronan's expression hardened slightly. They were common thugs. We didn't think they'd chase a child after we'd already beaten them. That's exactly what they'll do. Darren folded his hands on the table. You saw how she reacted, didn't you? Lydia hesitated. The memory surfaced immediately. The girl had been crying, not just from fear, from desperation. She kept begging us not to interfere, Lydia said slowly. Darren nodded. Exactly, Ronan frowned. You think she knew them? Of course she did. Darren leaned forward slightly. That alley was their territory. She knew exactly who they were. His voice remained steady, but there was an edge beneath it now. You embarrassed them in their own territory, in front of witnesses. Because of her, Ronan's eyes narrowed. Darren continued. Men like that survive on reputation. On fear, he tapped the table lightly. If people see them beaten and humiliated over a girl, what do you think happens to their reputation? Lydia didn't answer. Darren did. They lose face. The tavern noise seemed distant now. So they restore it, Darren said quietly. Ronan's voice was lower when he spoke. You're saying they would? Yes, Darren met his eyes. They would punish the girl. Silence. They probably dragged her back after we left. Darren continued. Beat her, tortured her. His voice didn't rise. If they are smart, they did it publicly, somewhere people would see. Lydia's jaw tightened. As an example, Darren finished. Ronan leaned back slowly in his chair. You're certain of this? Darren gave a tired smile. I've seen it happen before. He looked down at the untouched food again. More than once, Lydia spoke after a moment. Then why didn't you say this before? Darren laughed softly. You think it would have mattered? He glanced at her. Terik was already halfway into a fight before anyone understood the situation. Ronan said nothing. Darren continued, I tried to stop you because that girl was begging you not to intervene. That alone should have been a warning. Lydia looked away. Darren leaned back again. Helping people carries a price, he said quietly. Someone always pays it. Ronan's gaze returned to him. And you think we made her pay it? Darren nodded. Either the rescuer pays the price, he said, or the victim does. His eyes hardened slightly. Terik didn't think that far. Lydia's voice was sharp. He was trying to help. No, Darren said calmly. He was satisfying his hero complex. Lydia's eyes flashed. That's unfair. Darren held her gaze. Is it? Neither of them answered. He continued. Real heroism means accepting the consequences of your actions. His voice grew colder. Terik wanted the moment, the fight, the feeling of being the hero. Darren gestured vaguely toward the street outside. But the consequences, those fall on someone else. Ronan exhaled slowly. You think he did it for bragging rights? I think it was self-indulgence, Darren replied. The words hung in the air. Lydia stared at the table. Ronan's fingers tapped lightly against the wood as he thought. Finally, he asked quietly, if you believed this would happen, why didn't you stay? Darren looked at him. And do what? Protect her. For how long? Ronan didn't answer. Darren continued. A day, a week, a month. He shook his head. You're adventurers. You leave towns. You move on. His voice softened slightly. Those men live here. The meaning was obvious. Ronan's shoulders sank slightly. Lydia finally spoke again. If what you're saying is true, she looked at Darren, then we killed her. Darren didn't respond immediately. Then he said quietly, no. Both of them looked at him. You didn't kill her, he said, but you might have condemned her. The tavern door opened again somewhere behind them. Cold night air slipped into the room. None of them noticed. Ronan rubbed his eyes slowly. After a long silence, he said, we need to find out. Lydia nodded. Darren frowned. Find out what? Whether you're right, Ronan said. Darren stared at him. And if I am? Ronan's eyes hardened. Then Silver Sky will pay the price. Lydia looked up. For her, she said quietly. Darren studied them both for a long moment. Then he sighed. You two really are stubborn. Ronan gave a faint smile. So I've been told. Darren finally reached for his spoon. Fine, he said. But if we're doing this, we do it properly. Lydia tilted her head. What does that mean? Darren looked up at them. It means, he said calmly, we start by finding those men before they find out we're asking questions. Morning came gray and quiet over Keburn. A thin fog hung above the crooked rooftops of the southern district, as Ronan and Lydia walked down a narrow street that smelled faintly of rot and stagnant water. The farther they moved from the main avenues, the more the city changed. The stone buildings gave way to leaning wooden shacks. The cobblestones disappeared beneath packed dirt and refuse. Neither of them spoke. The conversation from the previous night lingered between them like a shadow. She's dead. Darren had said it so calmly. Ronan had slept poorly. Lydia had not slept at all. They turned a corner into a narrow alley and stopped. Several people were already there. Not close. No one stood closer than 10 paces from the shack at the end of the alley. A loose half-circle of onlookers had formed, silent and uneasy. No one spoke. No one approached. Lydia felt something in her chest tighten. Ronan moved forward slowly. The crowd parted without a word. Then they saw her. The girl hung from a wooden beam that jutted from the side of the shack. Naked, bruised, cuts covered her small body, some shallow, others deep. Her skin had turned a sickly, pale color in the morning air. Her wrists were bound above her head with coarse rope. Someone had carved a mark into the wood above her. A crude symbol, a warning. Lydia felt the world narrow. Her hands slowly clenched into fists. Ronan stood frozen. For several long seconds, neither of them moved. Finally, Lydia spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. They did it. Ronan swallowed hard. Yes. Around them, the gathered residents avoided looking directly at the body. Fear hung in the air. Why hasn't anyone taken her down? Lydia asked. An older man in the crowd spoke without meeting her eyes. You want their attention on you? His voice was flat. That girl got what she got because outsiders stepped in. Another woman murmured quietly, they'll come back if someone touches her. Ronan's jaw tightened. He stepped closer to the shack. Someone has to bring her down, he said. No one responded. Lydia stared up at the girl's face. The terror frozen in it made something cold settle inside her chest. She's dead. Darren's voice echoed in her mind. We didn't save that girl. We signed her death warrant. Lydia suddenly turned away. I'm going to find them. Ronan looked at her. I'll inform the city watch. Lydia laughed once, humorless. The watch? Due process still matters, Ronan said quietly. Lydia's eyes were burning. Tell that to her, Ronan didn't answer. After a moment, he nodded toward the main street. "Meet me tonight." Lydia didn't reply. She was already walking away. The city watch station stood near the market square. Clean stone walls, orderly guards, paperwork stacked neatly behind the counters. Ronan explained the situation clearly. A murdered child, public display, possible gang retaliation. The officer behind the desk listened with mild interest. Then he sighed. "That district again?" Ronan's brow furrowed. "You're aware of the area?" "Of course." The officer leaned back in his chair. "Listen, adventurer, the southern slums handle their own problems. A child was murdered." The officer shrugged. "It happens." Ronan stared at him. "You're not going to investigate. We'll send someone eventually." "When?" The officer gave a lazy wave. "When manpower allows." Ronan's jaw tightened, and entering that district tends to escalate things. The meaning was clear. The city watch preferred not to step into gang-controlled territory. Ronan turned without another word. Lydia spent the entire day searching. She started in the same alleys where the fight had happened, the same broken doorways, the same corners where men lounged in shadow. But the gang was gone. The usual lookouts weren't there. The tavern they frequented was closed. The gambling den down the street had empty tables. Lydia questioned anyone she could find. Most people refused to answer. A few whispered the same thing. Last night, that was the last anyone saw them. They were celebrating. Then they disappeared. By late afternoon, Lydia stood alone at the edge of the same alley where they had fought 2 days earlier. Empty, silent, she felt a slow chill creep through her thoughts. They disappeared. Her mind moved unwillingly toward a conclusion. A face surfaced in her thoughts. Calm eyes, quiet voice. "We start by finding those men before they find out we're asking questions." Lydia's stomach tightened. "No," she muttered. "It can't be. Darren wasn't that strong. He had fought as a backup attacker. Quiet, reserved, almost passive. That was what everyone had assumed." Lydia turned and started walking quickly toward the main district. The inn Darren had been staying at stood 2 streets away from the Adventurers Association. When Lydia pushed through the door, the innkeeper looked up in mild surprise. "You again?" "Darren," Lydia said immediately. "The adventurer staying here." The innkeeper scratched his beard. "He checked out." Lydia froze. "When?" "Early this morning." Her chest tightened. "Did he say where he was going?" The innkeeper shrugged. "Didn't ask." Lydia turned and ran back into the street. The evening crowds were thick now. Merchants shouted. Wagons rolled past. Lanterns were being lit along the road. She pushed through the crowd toward the city gates. By the time she reached them, the sky was turning orange. A guard looked up as she approached. "Gates closing soon." "An adventurer left this morning," Lydia said quickly. "Early, with a caravan." The guard thought for a moment. Yeah, her heart sank. First caravan out. Where was it headed? North Road. Lydia stared out beyond the gates where the road stretched into the fading light. "How long ago?" The guard shrugged. "Dawn, too late." Lydia stood there breathing hard as the sun disappeared behind the distant hills. Her thoughts churned. The gang disappeared. Darren left at dawn. Her mind replayed the conversation in the tavern. "We start by finding those men before they find out we're asking questions." Lydia closed her eyes. A quiet realization settled over her. "No," she whispered again. But this time it wasn't denial. It was something closer to awe. Far down the northern road, a caravan was already many miles away, and somewhere ahead of it walked a quiet traveler named Darren.